I am Katie. I have been a leader at the Enablement Squad for quite some time. The squad is a community of enablement practitioners who are just a huge group of enablement nerds that work together. It was founded about 2 years ago by Matt Scheidel and Stephanie Middaugh, and it's a phenomenal place where we all get together and talk about the struggles and the amazing things we're doing and shout each other out and share best practices. And I'm happy to share how to actually join the squad at the end of this session. But I've been in enablement for many years. I love building out enablement teams from the ground up at fast-growing startups. Prior to that, I was in the education world as an adjunct professor, doing all the other nerdy things. So I'm a lifelong nerd, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and excited to talk about learning in general, obviously. And I'd love to pass it over to our panelist members. We have such an amazing group with us today, and I think they're going to do a phenomenal job. So just going to go with whoever's on my right, which is Catherine. Let's pop to you. We got a 1 second. There we go.
Classic muted as I'm already speaking. Thank you, Katie. My name is Catherine Wilson. I am dialing in today from Indianapolis, Indiana, where it was snowing earlier this morning. It's supposed to be 70 on Saturday, so great. I work at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for almost 7 years. I started as a solutions engineer and worked into solutions engineering enablement. I have done pretty much anything you can think of when it comes to enablement, whether it's delivering in-person trainings, creating content, curriculums, programs as a whole, running analytics. But I've lately been spending my time in the onboarding world, thinking primarily about how we treat folks who've just joined, sellers who've just joined Salesforce. Super excited to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Before we jump to anyone else, there's a burning question that we want to ask as an icebreaker. What was the last purchase you regretted?
Okay, so I'm glad that we did that, because I knew that might be a question you would ask, and so I do have the thing next to me, and I'm really glad that you reminded me. The last regret, and I have to be careful because the dogs are right next to me. The last purchase I regret is this dog toy that did have, it was a duck. It did have a face. Both of it was marketed as the strongest. It's got, this is a bone, a lot of rope. There's a squeaker that I definitely can't touch. And yeah, it's not indestructible, and I totally regret purchasing it.
If all of us could actually go create an indestructible dog toy that's actually indestructible, we'd be millionaires. I am positive of that.
It's not. I just don't think it's possible.
I don't either. Dennis, you're next on my screen. Welcome. Tell us a bit about you.
Sure thing, Kate. My name is Dennis Oljai. I work at Allego. Been here for about a month now as a leader of product marketing. But I started off my career actually in sales, done door-to-door copier sales in rural Massachusetts, which was a very humbling experience. I then worked in sales training and sales consulting. I've actually worked as an instructional training designer for about 5 or 6 years. And most recently, I was vice president of product marketing at Dun & Bradstreet. But very excited to be here, share my learnings and my perspectives with the group, and have a great conversation. I guess it's my turn now to share my purchase that I regret. Actually happened a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who have done furniture shopping online, this will be very familiar. I went on Wayfair. We needed a new headboard for our bed, and I decided to purchase what seemed to be a white headboard, and when it arrived, it was very clearly gray. So that has now resulted in a new project for me to paint that as mandated by my wife. So that's on my to-do list this weekend. But that's the one that I regret most recently.
Nothing beats good online shopping with terrible colors that come and you're like, that was not that's not the advertised color.
No, it didn't help that the description actually said white, but just going to roll with it.
I am so sorry. I hope you enjoy your weekend of painting. David, we'll pass to you.
Hey, everybody. David Delaney with Tenbound, and I'm excited to be here. I work with SDR teams, BDR teams, LDR teams, how you want to focus that discussion. And we help them with training and enablement and coaching here in Silicon Valley. So really excited about this topic because it's very much a specialty, and we're in it every day. So the a purchase that I regret the most is it's also dog related, because I bought one of those leashes that you can put around your waist, because I thought, wow, hands free, right? And it turns out that I just spend the whole dog walk now looking at my phone and, basically walking in front of cars and almost getting hit. And also he pulls me the whole time like a reindeer on a sled or something like that. So horrible, not recommended.
I have actually wanted one of those for quite some time. So now I am going to take that off the list of things, and I will just do the handheld leash. Well, I do want to pull to the audience. We have quite a big group here, and I know this is a topic that all of us have faced at some time doing training. And so here's one for the group. It's a poll. If one of your team members had a conflict during a training, would you want them to A, take the call with the client, or do the training? Let's see what everyone says. You should see the poll pop up. Oh, look at those do the training people. I'm so curious. This is amazing. We've got about 30 respondents. We'll give everyone a few more seconds to get the responses in, and then we'll in the poll. We've got some chats. Oh, it depends on if it's a live training or an online training. That's a great point. I didn't give context. I'll let you decide for now. All right. Most people would have them take the call. Panelists, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Dennis, what would you do?
I mean, I was one of the ones that actually helped contribute to this question, and I was biased. But I sincerely do believe that we should empower sellers to take the call, right? I think there are ways where we can structure training to be asynchronous, where we can allow folks to view training on their own time. And we definitely want to empower reps to bring in as much revenue as possible. So I'm on the take the call side.
Is anyone else on the panel different? Would you have them attend the training?
So I have to admit, like, honestly, having been a seller and now being in enablement, I empathize so much with both, right? Like, I've been that seller that's like, no, like, especially as an SE where, my role was to support the sales rep. So in an essence, I'm really at the mercy of the client's schedule as well. It's hard. I will say, Dennis, when you're the first person that recently made me remember that this is actually what I would even call competition for enablement, in the sense that we're competing with a rep's attention, and the reason they have that job, they're being paid by your organization to sell. So when we think about the economics and the incentives at play here, I can't fault a sales rep for taking a call. I think more importantly, what this helps me uncover is, Dennis, to what your point, like the demand for asynchronous learning and the demand for it to be on the learner's time when they can fit this in between doing their day job, which is what we're telling them, what we're paying them to do. So I love this question.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because I really do think that 9 to 5 is prime selling time, and it's gotten so much more difficult to not only get in front of decision makers, but once you actually schedule that, to keep that time and to engage them. And to ask a rep to move that meeting to attend the training, I think is asking a lot of them, right? Because it takes so many touches now, with more people using, social selling, email. There's more people using it now with the post-pandemic world that we're in, right? So those meetings are so precious, and you can't ask reps to reschedule. That's my personal opinion.
I guess I have a follow-up question too with that, Dennis. So knowing that, let's say we're all on board that 9 to 5 is precious selling time, knowing that there are certain probably topics or content that has to take place, especially if you're in a global business, right, where there's only a precious few hours where everyone is on the same time zone. How much further in advance would you feel comfortable saying, okay, if we get the invite in between, if it has to happen between 9 and 5, how far in advance would you want that notice, or would feel good for you to then turn around to your sellers and say, okay, I know that this is during 9 to 5. However, I want you to prioritize this one. Like, what would make you change your direction?
Yeah, I think we talked about this in our prep session as well. But I think avoiding those times of the month where we know that it's end of the month or end of the quarter. Those are sacred times that should be avoided altogether. But I think if you give sufficient notice, and that being, I would say, at least a month time to give folks to get that on their calendar and work around it with their prospect, I think that's probably sufficient. But again, it depends, right? Every company is going to be different. And in my view, these live trainings and live interactions should really be reserved for interactive dialogue, right? So if the training is going to be mostly one-sided anyway, I think the rep can reserve the right to watch that at a later time, right? Maybe at a faster speed or on their own time. But if it's really a one-sided training, we should really be cognizant of protecting sellers' time and helping empower them to access that in a more convenient way that's revolves sort of around their selling schedule.
There's a really interesting discussion going on in the chat too about, Malia had said something great around really making sure that the opportunity cost of your training is really worth them giving up time. And then Sue had also said, make sure your sessions are compelling enough. And so I think that's an interesting point too. Like, is what you're creating good enough for someone to actually take time out of the day and go to? And make sure it's compelling and answers that question. And David, you unmuted, you might have something to say there as well.
Yeah, I was nodding my head because there's always going to be some excuse, to not do the training, especially if they're doing really well and they feel like, they've got it under control and they don't see enough value in the training. There's always going to be some reason to put it off. So it's a tough one, especially if money's involved, and they think that they could potentially get money. The training has to be worth it, and they are getting a lot of value out of it in order to make that happen. And it's also kind of like going to the gym. I mean, there's always an excuse not to go to the gym. Always, every day that you wake up. And if you just don't see the value in it, and there's a customer call instead, you're going to blow it off.
I think that's great. And I also think that this leads to a really interesting conundrum that we're all facing in this new, it's not even new anymore, let's be honest. We're like 3 years in at this point, virtual environment. I'd love to hear just what are some of the challenges your teams face in this virtual environment. I think this is one of them in terms of like, where do I put my time and what's the opportunity cost of giving up something? But what are some of the current challenges you see your team facing in a virtual environment when it comes to learning and just in general? And Catherine, you're unmuted, so let's start with you. And then Dennis, you had some really interesting thoughts, so let's jump to you next.
Yeah, so I think there's just a general fatigue, right? Like, it was really easy before the pandemic for us to forget that we're all humans, and that the people that we're calling to buy something, the people that we're calling to ask for support, every single person is a human at the end of the day who's living through an unprecedented time. So this, I think, for one reason, is really humbled, and really for something that was necessary. But it offers, like you said, a great ordeal of challenges with how do you spend your time. I think, to your point, content has to be entertaining. It has to be interesting. You're competing with literally everything for people's attention. I think knowing one of the biggest challenges that I've witnessed is people wanting to be in person, obviously. I think accepting that training is probably going to be virtual until it makes sense for our company, for our customers, for our clients, for our employees. So accepting that is honestly a huge challenge, a huge hurdle just to get over. And then accepting that you probably have to redesign a lot of your content, because the biggest mistake I've seen is folks taking things they used to do in person and now just literally using the same slides, the same the same agenda, the same, like, factoring in breaks. I mean, literally, I would say, so what I've done when I deliver training, I try not to have more than 60 minutes of someone sitting at their seat. And whether, so we factor in times for, hey, everyone stand up, turn your camera off, go walk away, go get a glass of water, go do a stretch. So factoring in the fact, like, remembering that we are all human beings who are spending a lot of time sitting in a chair and a desk. That's really what's top of mind, I think, for me, is how we set ourselves up for success. And a lot of that goes back to redesigning, because it's just not the same.
Completely agree. So much of what we have to do as quality enablers is making sure that what we put out actually fits to our learner, but also fits to the environment that we're in now. Dennis, you had some interesting thoughts too on some of the challenges your team was facing in a virtual environment. I'd love to hear and let the team hear as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, again, you'll hear me say this time and again, but I really think focused selling time is the greatest challenge, right? There's more meetings than ever. There's more technology than ever. I mean, count the number of tools you're asking your sales teams to log into and learn, right? Juggling all those tools and remembering them takes time. There's more distractions, including personal distractions, right? We're all, hybrid, if nothing else, right? Sometimes at home, sometimes in the office, but that also adds to, reduction in selling time. So that's number one. And I think once you find the time to sell, I think the new virtual environment has introduced a couple of new challenges as well. Number one being cutting through the noise. Your sales teams, as well as every other sales team on the planet, is now using digital, right? So your buyers are inundated by email, social messages, calls, right? And they're also facing a time crunch. So it's really difficult to cut through the noise and really stand out. And me, as a prior seller and marketer, I can really sniff out when something's not personal or relevant, right? So I think really relating to your buyer, keeping it short, conversational, and personal is really important. And again, getting in front of decision makers is getting difficult too, right? Because if you look at a director, VP level above person, right, they're going to be in back to back all day, and to carve out 30 minutes or even an hour for a sales call, you have to really resonate with them to make them give you their time. So that's really important. And once you're on the call, you have to start building trust virtually, right? There's some tactics to do that. It's actually easy to do that once you learn the tricks of the trade, but not everyone's used to doing that, right? I think we're used to interacting face to face, and I think that's a new skill that needs to be learned. So I think that's something that's definitely popped up in this new virtual environment that we live in.
Dennis, I love that. And it's something my team brought up just today. We were talking about, hey, we're still virtual and we don't have that time to work together, even as an enablement team, to build up trust with each other. What are some of the tricks of the trade? I'd love to know. I bet our audience would love to know as well. Give us like one or two.
Well, I would pick some of the books that you have in your bookshelf behind you, right? And I would maybe strike up a conversation about that, or a personal artifact, or maybe you have a diploma, right? And maybe, I know a friend that went there or something, right? So there's tons of ways that you can, use that to your advantage to build a personal connection, break the ice, right? And try to build a relationship with the person that's at the other side of the camera, right? So that's just one of them.
I love that. And now I'm going to curate my books, because I don't know what's behind me, but it's definitely going to be what people think of me from now on. So don't read them until I finish curating them, everyone. David, I'd love to hear your thoughts. We talked a bit about churn and given some examples, but just in general, what are some of the things your team is facing right now in a virtual environment?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest challenges, especially for the SDR team, is a lot of the learning that would take place was in the office when everyone was working together, and they could listen to each other on calls and read emails just over the shoulder, and that has essentially disappeared. that whole interaction over the last couple of years. So the big challenge is with training and coaching really is how do you replicate that environment in a remote setting? and be able to sort of crowdsource the learning in a way that we used to, specifically especially for people that are newer to the job, and some creative things that I've seen is having sort of an open Zoom window happening, for an hour or two with all the SDRs, listening to calls and seeing the emails and different touch points that people are sending out, and being able to offer in time advice and coaching on the fly. And then also with a manager being able to spend that time one-to-one with people, synchronously as they're going through their day. So
I love that. And there's something that's going on in the chat right now, and I think it's an important question to bring to the team. And I think it's really interesting. What do I think about requiring people to attend learning based on just skill level? So if they're performing well versus not performing well. There's a lot of opinions in the chat. I'd love to hear all of your opinions in terms of how do you deal with that if someone isn't performing well, but they want to continue to jump to customer calls? What do you do with that? Who do you use to help you make sure that person's attending? Overall thoughts and feelings. And Catherine, you're unmuted.
I just had like an initial reaction.
I saw your face. So I was like, I'm excited.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough, right? Because, and my reaction was like that because do we know that they're not selling well because they're not going to training? Or is there another reason they're not selling well? There's no way for us to know unless that's what I should say. Unless you have, and I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of us do not have this data in enablement. It's really hard to pin down and to say with confidence, this training influenced this ACV. So the idea of, and I don't have an answer for that, right? Like I just know that we can't do a one-to-one thing. My reaction is to dig so much deeper, right? Why can't they attend the training? How are you spending your time? Let's talk through your time management. And let's talk through why maybe you think you're not selling, why you're not hitting these quota. What obstacles? I think so much comes from us not assuming that we know, if this person took this training, they would be selling better. Probably not. So my reaction is to get to the root of the problem. What is it that they're not succeeding at? Is it because they don't know things about the product that they're selling? Okay, that's one solution that we go down. Is there something totally personal going on? And me trying to force them into training is going to make them quit? That's another route. So my reaction is the classic consulting answer. It depends. And I encourage all enablers, especially enablers of sales professionals, to really dig deep on the purpose of this training. What is the expected outcome of how we're going to use this hour together? And try less to connect the dots between this training is going to get you ACV. Because I think salespeople know that's a lie.
That was beautiful. If I could write a quote about that and put it on my wall, I would.
I'll put that that'll be the thing that Dennis talks about with me when he's
beautiful. Dennis or David, I'd love to hear your thoughts if they're different, or if you agree, or if you do something completely different from what Catherine just said.
I think, look, I think there's some interesting conversation going on in the chat as well, right? I've been trying to chime in as well as talk, but I think creating different cohorts by performance level as well as role keeps the training more targeted, right? I think we need to move away from one size fits all training, right? And I think it's too convenient for us to think that way and get everyone in a room and just dump knowledge and just in case you need it, right? This is just in case training or knowledge, right? I think we need to move more towards personalized, smaller groups. I've just seen it so much in my experience. People are so much more willing to engage and talk and learn in smaller cohorts, and you can keep it more relevant to their role, right? And hopefully improve performance. So that's where I think technology can come into play and help with some of those issues. But I think the more we can keep training tailored on reps time, personal, and also incorporate sort of role specific needs as well as performance, I think that's sort of the holy grail. Again, easier said than done, but I think that would produce the best outcomes.
I love that. David, any other thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at training as sort of a level playing field, and it's the building blocks and the block and tackling, if you will, of the job. And so everyone starts on a level playing field, and everyone should participate in it and get as much out of it. But really, where the differentiation happens in performance is like Catherine mentioned. It's on so many different. There's so many different aspects that come into that. So if you look at training, it's almost like, okay, we're gonna make sure that everyone has the basic building blocks of how to do the job and speak, in the vocabulary, and they know the soft skills. But once they leave that training environment, then it's there's so many different factors that impact the performance.
I love that. And it segues into a few other questions we had talked about earlier this week. But before we jump into those, I want to hit a poll really fast. What percentage of training do your reps actually attend? And I know this question will come up. So let's say live training. And when I say live, I mean Zoom live versus in person, because some of us can't do that quite yet. Give everyone a few seconds. We got a large percentage of 75%. That just means we're all phenomenal enablers who really do a great job catering to our teams. So, David, you brought up an interesting point of training is this foundation, and there's so many more things that it can happen post-training to actually help reinforce what we're doing. When do you think the right time to implement training is? And I'll ask the group in general, but Dennis, you had a good point between just in time and just in case. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from judging by the poll results, right, I think that's probably where a lot of us are thinking, right? Can we deliver training that's relevant and going to help produce the best outcomes? Too often, training becomes a vehicle for everyone to communicate and share their information, but it's not necessarily always going to be the most impactful. And, live events are not necessarily always the best modality to share that information, right? I really do think live events should be reserved for dialogue and conversation, just like we're having today here, right? We're engaging in the chat, we're engaging face to face. I mean, if this was just me, delivering a PowerPoint presentation, it would just be such a different dynamic, right? Do we really need to do that? Watch that webinar at a different time on your own time, right? I think these live interactions really need to be geared towards that just-in-time training that's taking the feedback from the field, right? What's going to be most valuable to them? What's going to help them deliver, the best outcomes? And another thing I'll throw out there that I've seen work really well is actually, using your top performers, right? And the people who are doing really well as an extended member of your enablement team, right? Because sellers love to learn from other sellers, right? And they respect their peers who are hitting their quota and achieving great results. Bring them into the enablement team, right? And have them be the leaders and the coaches and set an example to the rest of the team, right? That way, they're not bored on the training, right? And just attending just to attend, but they're an active participant in the enablement team. And I've seen that work really, really well. So that's just another example. And they keep it relevant, right? And that is a draw for people to attend if one of their peers is presenting. So just a tip that I've seen work really well.
Love, love, love that. People, take note. Bring your top sellers onto the enablement team. We do something similar here. We have an advisory board with our top sellers anytime we're launching. And we also include new hires because oftentimes they have something that we didn't have before. And it's good to get that fresh opinion. Catherine, you unmuted. Anything you want to add to?
I resonate so much with that, Dennis. The idea of bringing in folks who've done it, who are seen in the company as being successful doing whatever it is that I'm trying to teach you. It helps. I think that a lot of us who are in enablement on this call have been in sales as well. That gives us some credibility getting in the door. But if they miss the intro, they just think that I'm someone that's been hired to teach them something. They don't know that I've actually done the thing. So bringing in someone who's done the thing, and I from a manager standpoint, I really enjoy that as an opportunity for some sort of stretch project. It's that person, that sales rep. We're human. We love talking about ourselves. We love talking about how, and explaining things. So having that person come in, that's then something. It's a symbiotic relationship. I as an enablement person am giving you a platform to show off, and you're going to take that back with you to your sales reps and say, look how good I am. Someone wanted me to talk about this. So it's very useful. That is one of my favorite plays ever in the entire world, is to bring in sales reps that are doing and being a very thoughtful mediator and in setting up them for success, and really pulling out, okay, what is it that I need you to translate to my audience? Was it how you managed your calendar? Was it how you got a hold of someone through like the crazy investigative skills you did? Is it how you did quoting? Put a lot of intention into how you're using that person's time. I love that, Dennis. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for giving me the soapbox to stand on and talk about it again.
Yeah, I think Patricia mentioned it in the chat, right? You have to earn the right to speak, right? And I think top performing reps have earned the right. They've walked the walk so they can talk the talk, right? So bring them onto your team and bring in that experiential component to your learning, right? So learning doesn't always have to be, theory and, knowledge dumps. Bring in those top performers and those real life experiences into your learning. I love the sports analogy when talking about sales, right? You think about, your all-time favorite athlete, right? It may be, I'm not going to mention mine because I might divide the whole room, right? Big Tom Brady fan here. But, the amount of time that these athletes look at how they perform, look at their game tape, right? Bring those game tape moments into your learning, right? And rally people around what the person did well, what they didn't do well. And that's going to just make it so much more engaging to your sales teams versus the dry, PowerPoint presentation. So just a tip, but I've seen that work really well as well.
David, you came off mute.
I just wanted to put an exclamation point there because, people they're flooded with content. You spend all day, learning things, but they're starving for the context and how to put that content into practice, quickly and contextually within their own environment. And so, yeah, great advice, having those top performers there and being able to really bring it into their daily life in short snippets. It's just so much more effective.
That leads me to another question. So we've talked about who should be involved with training, what it should look like. We touched on this a bit, but I want to dig deeper. What's the right cadence or amount of training reps should be going through? And what are some things you should be thinking about that are top of mind when you're launching trainings? Catherine, you had an interesting 9 to 5 selling time point. I'd love for you to expand on that for the group that's here today.
Yeah. So in our prep call and just kind of discussing, about enablement, one analogy that came to mind, and Dennis, you speak my language. I live in the world of metaphors and analogy. Something that came to my mind was a concept in marketing, which is the idea of inbound versus outbound marketing. And outbound marketing is everything. It's a newer concept because technology has really led this push. We think about outbound is me talking at you. It's all of us hearing the same advertisement on the radio. It's all of us seeing, TV ads when we're watching streaming or anything. And it's one size fits all in the sense that I, as a marketer, have decided that I have something to tell you and you're going to listen, and this is how I'm going to communicate it to you. That used to be inbound, or sorry, it used to be the way that all enablement was as well, right? It was, and it still is, unfortunately. I am an enabler. I have something that I think you need to know, and I am going to put this together, whether you can make it or not. This is the time we're doing it. This is when you need to be there. And if you have a call, I'm super sorry that you have to watch this recording. How different would the world be if things were inbound? Inbound meaning I, as the consumer, I, as the learner, I choose when and where I engage with enablement content. So as a marketer, we talk about your website needs to be set up for inbound traffic, meaning if I just saw an ad, I'll use my couch as an example. I just bought a love sack. If I just bought a couch, it requires a lot of help with assembly. It's very modular. I'm not expecting that I'm going to get that information from a Lovesac TV commercial. That's not anywhere in their outbound marketing. However, it is in their inbound marketing strategy, because I can go to their website. I can type in any Google. I can call them if I want to. I'm not going to do that. I can go on YouTube. I know that they, as a company, have set up on their controlled environments where I find the information to put my couch together. So as enablers, we have to model that. Our enablement websites, our enablement universe has to be ready for that traffic. Because to your point, Dennis, I'm not gonna learn something unless my client's asking for it. Like the analogy I think we put in this webinar was, you're not gonna learn how to fix a pipe until you need to. I'm not on my list of to-do things. It's like, learn how to take apart disposal and put it back together. I'm not going to do that until I have to. And that's how we're approaching learning. That's how we approach selling. I'm not going to learn. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to learn this new feature that's buried in a bunch of release notes until my customer's asking me a question that forces me to know that thing. So all of this is to say that, like, we're becoming so much more savvy as humans and as learners, and technology is pushing us in that direction. But it's not until you have your inbound marketing set up that your learners are going to feel taken care of. I feel taken care of as a customer of Lovesac because I know that whatever question I have about how to put this thing together exists and it lives somewhere on a site. So I can go on my own time and find that, versus waiting around for a Lovesac commercial. The analogy only goes so far.
But I mean, that inbound and outbound analogy is just so spot on. And I'm sorry, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use it. And I think
you're not stealing it from me. It's not stolen. It's licensed.
I appreciate it. We go way back, so I can license it for free. Right. But again, it's about, we've been talking about outbound enablement, right? We've been talking about outbound. Like, what are we pushing to the sales team? But how are we prepared to receive the inbound enablement, right? And for the most part, for enablement teams, that inbound website is your content management system, right? Where are you hosting all of those best practice videos or brochures or training recordings, right? And organizing that, making it easy to access and find when the seller needs it, right? When something breaks or when the customer asks for something is just so important, right? That's just so important. Getting your inbound enablement set up so that you can generate the best results is critical.
David, I think you're unmuted.
I was just going to say, we sometimes see like shadow training happening where they can't find the information, they can't get the training that they need, and so they start to just make it themselves. And so if you hear about something like that, that's probably a lot better than the training that you're doing. Because they're actually contextualizing it at the same time, and they can find it and they know where it is and stuff like that. So if they go to the wiki and they go to the training portal and they can't find it, they immediately start asking around to see if anybody has what they need. And it sometimes it actually forms like a little shadow training unit, and that is duplicative, really, especially if you have an enablement function.
I have so many questions now, David. I love that analogy. And I think it's something that, as an enablement leader before, I faced. How do you harness the shadow trainings that are happening and actually make them work for you? I think, like you said, sometimes they are better than what we have because they're in the field, they're seeing what's happening. What have you done in the past to see, like, oh, there's the shadow training happening. How can I use it as an enabler to actually make it work for the rest of the team, and also make sure that it's not rogue? Because sometimes that happens too.
Bring them in the fold. I mean, that's the main thing, and we've touched on, the top performers will go out and find training. Like if they can't find the training that they need at the company, they'll just start proactively, going out and figuring out what it takes to get the job done. And so bring them in the fold, have them be part of your effort. And we even see some people look at it as almost like a threat, because I'm supposed to be the sales enablement person. Like, how come you're doing all this stuff on the side? You're all trying to row in the same direction. I know this is way easier said than done, but we're all trying to get to the same end goal, which is driving revenue for the company. So let's work on it together.
Catherine, I think you're unmuted as well. Anything you wanted to add?
So I see my colleague Steve Bullington is on this. If anyone else from Salesforce is, earmuffs for a second, because I'm going to spill a secret. So one of the things I identify with everything you just said, right? Like it can be seen as, some people does feel threatening. My full-time job is to create enablement. If you're creating it, does it look like I'm not doing my job? That kind of thing. One of my favorite things to do when I stumble upon rogue learning is, like you said, investigate it, pull them in. But I love to ask the people pointed questions around, why did you feel like you had to create this? What did the company not have? What were you looking for? And then also, how long did it take you? Because I'm a data nerd. I love to quantify as much as I can. That's then what I take and go back to my enablement leaders and say, did you know that your sales reps are spending 30 hours a week creating enablement? No. Is that what you want them to be doing? Why do they feel the need to create this? So really using, I love it. I love it when I run into it, because then I know I can learn from it. To your point, they've put it already in the context that they need. So I love that I can learn from it. And B, I investigate how long it took them to do this, and because that becomes quantifiable information for leadership to say, this many people, if I've got 10 managers that are spending 10 hours a week each, that's 100 hours. Don't you want to give those managers 100 hours back in their week? Like that's how I sell it. So, Steve, you can now take your earmuffs off.
Steve said, amen, Salesforce sister. So I think he agrees. And what happens in this webinar stays in this webinar? I don't know.
And on the recording.
I want to go back to the concept of inbound and outbound, because one, I love it. People in the chat love it. I'm going to steal it as well, since Catherine, you and I go back way beyond today. Lifetime together. I think I can use it too. But how does that change how we onboard our teams? I think historically, outbound's been a very popular way to onboard our teams. Just here's everything you need to know and go. Mm-hmm. What does that change in terms of ongoing training, but onboarding as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. What it means, the short answer is, you have to start learning more about your new hires. And I say that because every new person that's come to your company brings with them experience and a past. And that's why you hired them. Why you need to understand that experience and that past is so you don't waste their time in onboarding. There's nothing more frustrating than coming to a job that you were just killing it at. That's the reason you got this new job. And to feel like they're trying to teach you something that you already know how to do. So the point it's acknowledging the history that your new hires come with, and then designing the onboarding so that it's efficient to that history. To give you a very specific example, I used to sell Salesforce Marketing Cloud. We have Salesforce Marketing Cloud certifications. You can become an email specialist. If I see that that is part of the onboarding plan that my leaders want, then I know that they're going to be hiring people who probably already have that certification. So then I don't have to use my onboarding to give them that certification. They already know it. How different would their onboarding be if I didn't know that about them, if I didn't acknowledge that about them? I would be putting them through months of training that they didn't need, which can lead to churn, which can lead to burnout. So it's really crucial in onboarding that you, as a first line manager, whoever is the person hiring that person, you treat them like a human. You treat them like they've been at other companies before your company, and you make their onboarding as specific to them as you can. How you set up for success with the inbound marketing analogy, it means that you as a manager have gone through and sifted through some of that noise for them. So if there's a website, you've gone through and you've looked at all of the resources your company has, and you said, all right, I've scoured the earth. I have now curated exactly what you need because I know what you know and I know what you don't know. And this is the plan that I have put together for us to make sure you succeed in this job. That's how I approach onboarding.
That was amazing. I want to get another perspective too. Dennis, at Lego you had said something around what y'all call everboarding. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the word onboarding just sounds so definitive, right? There's a start and an end, and then you're ready to go, and then you never need to, do anything ever again. Just for me, that's just how it comes across, right? For me, learning is a continuous thing, right? And that's why I kind of threw that word out there, everboarding, right? But it's really, again, I love analogies. I'll throw the athlete analogy out there again, right? They're always training, they're always learning, even when they're at the top of their game, right? And the reality is, the sales game is constantly changing, right? It's not static. And learning needs to adapt to that and be continuous and evolving as well, right? So when I think about onboarding, I think categorically speaking, teams always focus it on, a couple of things, right? One is sales method. So how do I orchestrate the sales process from start to end? Maybe you might have your method of choice that you're using at your organization. Typically, that's part of onboarding. Sales skills, right? How do you do questioning, objection handling, etc.? Knowledge, right? Lots of knowledge baked in, whether it's on the market or the product or the buyer persona, all that kind of stuff. Then you've got the operational, administrative stuff, right? How do you use the tech, the logins, the tools? But I think really the one that gets missed often in onboarding and needs to be front and center is experiential learning, right? So how do you bring in those, like I said before, game tape moments, right? What's happening in the field? What are top performers doing? And the beauty of virtual selling in the virtual world is we can capture all those moments, right? Before it was a phone call and then you never knew what happened. That knowledge got lost. But now you can ask your teams to record calls, save those calls, right? And use as a library of knowledge that you can put on your onboarding and everboarding process, because you need to continually capture all those experiential learning moments and build those libraries of best practices, right? Because that's really where the rubber hits the road, right? When you apply the knowledge and you're in a customer facing situation, that's the best place to learn, right? I mean, again, I'm going to throw out another example. I mean, when's the last time you bought something and you read the manual, right? I mean, you buy something, you plug it in, you play around with it, you learn by doing, right? And that's how people like to learn as well. I mean, that's not to say you throw out everything else, right? Absolutely not saying that, but bring the experiential component as much forward as you can in your onboarding is just so powerful, right? They're going to ramp up so much quicker because they're going to be able to replicate what top performers do, add their spin, and as Catherine said, maybe add something from their background and make it their own, and really be able to start producing results faster, right? So just a quick tip there.
David, you talked about this as we were prepping too. there's the experiential side, but then there's also the role of the manager. What role does the manager play in this process?
Yeah, I mean, so the manager, brings to life what they're actually going through as they're, starting to do the job, and then brings in the experience that they've had to be able to connect the dots and help improve the performance of the rep. And they bring a lot to the table. A lot of managers are, really focused on the management aspect of the job and not necessarily the coaching. But if you look back to, how sales managers used to work with sales reps, they had a lot of dashboard time. So they not like a computer dashboard, but like actually sitting in the car, one-to-one, driving out to companies. If you've seen like Tommy Boy, for example, driving out to companies, talking about how they're going to prepare, who they're talking to, the background, and tying it all together, and then having the call, and then driving back and debriefing on it. And that can be sort of replicated now in a digital environment with a lot of the tools that Dennis is talking about. And so that's really the role of the manager, to make sure that they reinforce and contextualize the training for the rep.
I love
Couldn't
that.
agree more. Yeah, I mean, I think this came up in the chat earlier, right? I forget who mentioned it, but too often, managers sort of pass that baton to enablement and say, "Hey, it's your problem." No, right? You can't do that.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mute. The Office episode. You can learn everything about sales from Dwight Schrute. He's amazing. So.
But you're so true though. Like that idea that, I mean, even as an SE, like I would have plane rides with my AE. I would have Ubers to the hotel. Like we had all this natural, organic time to discuss how we were going to go about this meeting. And that's really hard to replicate digitally, virtually.
Amazing points. I know we're getting close to time, so I wanted to just quickly wrap up some of the key takeaways that I had, and then I do want to jump into like a quick rapid fire tip round with all of you, because when you're also smart, let's go have dinner later because we're best friends at this point, but for the panelists and the audience to hear as well. And so for me personally, I think some of the big things that came out of this, and I'd love to hear people post in the chat what they felt as well, like some of the core takeaways. This idea of taking your best reps and bringing them into the enablement team is so huge for all of us. The other one, and we didn't quite say this, but Catherine, you hinted on it quite a bit in terms of like, hey, if we have a rep that's struggling, what do we do with them? And your whole entire answer boiled down to this idea of like, start with curiosity. As an enablement leader, don't just be like, oh, they're struggling with discovery, let's give them a discovery training. Maybe that's not true. Start with curiosity and look at the data. Another big one is one, I think we're all taking this inbound and outbound. We're going to all run with it. It'll be all over LinkedIn soon. So we'll make sure that all credit goes to you, Catherine. David, you talked a lot about just that training experience. How do we actually make it? How do we take that beautiful experience we had in the not virtual world and recreate that so we can still learn together and still grow together in a virtual environment? And I think it's so important to think about that and think about that shift and what we need to do as enablers to make that happen. With that, quick rapid fire tip round for every panelist here today. First, drop your link in the chat for the audience to connect with you. I'll drop mine as well. And if you want to join the Enablement Squad, shoot me a message. I'll help you get on there. But let's start with just a quick tip. Sky's the limit. Your very favorite enablement tip. Ready, go, Dennis.
I'm going to go with make it entertaining. I mean, one of my college professors told me a long time ago, and it's stuck with me ever since, that entertainment and education are related, right? The more you can make your learning fun, the more it's going to stick and stand out. And a good way to do that is bring in those top performers and extended members of the sales team that are doing well into your learning. program, because they're going to have also fun anecdotes and personal relationships, and they're going to know what's going to resonate with the sales team. So bring in those top performers and make it fun.
Beautiful. Make it fun. Catherine.
I love those. I love that. I try to use a lot of images. What I think I read once, they're called like disruptor images in presentations. So if what you're saying can be done with a fun image instead as a talking point. The other thing that I'll leave you all with is a bad joke. I that's the language that I speak in most often, second to English. So the joke, you can steal this one. What is Beethoven's favorite fruit? Anyone? I'm like looking at the chat.
Like
Someone's
chat
definitely heard this. Na. So like, and just again, like use icebreakers, like the one we use today. Your most regrettable purchase. I love using that as an icebreaker, especially virtually when I can show you what it is. Just those are some quick tips off the top of my head. Images, bad jokes, and icebreakers.
Right. And we tried to make it fun today, so hopefully everyone thought it was fun and learned something, right? That we tried to
nothing else,
practice what we preach, right?
David, quick tip us.
Yeah, customer obsession. So if you run out of ideas for training, or you're trying to figure out what's going to be the next thing that we go into, always go back to the customers. How do they use the product? What's their vocabulary? What problems are they trying to solve? There's an unlimited amount of content there that you can start to bring in. And especially for newer sellers, if they haven't been in the industry for 20 years and they don't have the vocabulary, there's an unlimited amount that they could learn there. So we always go back to the customers, the industry, start there and then build back how your solution helps.
So valuable. Start with the customer obsession. It's why we're all here. It's what we're doing. All right, we are at time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for all the time and work you put into this and for just bringing your smart brains here and sharing it with the rest of the team. Thank you, audience, for joining our special Sales Hacker event. We are so grateful for you to come talk with us. It was a great discussion today. We look forward to seeing everyone in future events. Thank you all.